الحمد لله وكفى وسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى أما بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والذين جاهدوا فينا لنهدينهم سبلنا سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. Continuing our discussion on some of the kayfiyat, some of the halat, some of the maqamat that a salik or a murid usually come across when they're traversing a suluk or a tariq. Today the maqam is called i'tisam, and we all know the famous ayah in the Quran, وَأَعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا, which is to hold on to the habl, the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, the very apparent meaning of this and the bare minimum that is required from us, and it is well understood, is the Quran and the sunnah as the habl, as the rope that we are ordered to hold on to. What that means is that all the legalities that come with it, the ata'at, taking no for a no and yes for a yes, doing ittiba of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the apparent meaning of it, that this is something that's the bare minimum that is required, and that is the lowest level that we do the i'tisam, which is to make sure that a person is following and a person is committed to the Quran and the Sunnah, and they take it as a worldview. Really, if you want to express it from that perspective, that it's not just something that is a small part of our life, but it is our life. It is the lens through which we perceive things. It is the lens through which we understand things. Okay, because the reality presents itself to us on a daily basis. What is our mind? How does that mind work? How do we look at these things? How do we decide what is good, what is bad, what is moral, what is ethical? All of these things, this is happening every single day. And so we need to be cognizant of what our attachment to the habl is. Because if we say that the bare minimum is the Quran and the Sunnah, and that is the lens through which look at our life, and whether it's individually, communally, then it should show. It should show. And the deen of Islam, this comprehensive, very elaborate deen, should not be reduced to just a few acts of ibadah, a few intellectual exercises, or even a few spiritual kind of endeavors. It's a full framework, worldview that we have to adopt. And so it means that a really good understanding of Quran and Sunnah is required to at least have that bare minimum, or being attached to those who have that kind of understanding. And this is why you find that within our tradition, this concept of suhbah with the ulama, with the sulaha, is so necessary. This is really the reason, because they are the ones who understand the habl, they are the ones who understand what the i'tisam means. Right? And so we learn it through them, or we ask them if you don't know it. Everybody's busy, in their lives, and right? So not everybody gets the opportunity, the chance to learn this blessed Sharia. But there are people, there's always a Jamaat. Alhamdulillah, this is the dua of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There's always a Jamaat that will be present, so that it's incumbent upon us to be attached to that Jamaat. So we have that, attachment to the habl of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, otherwise it becomes so easy. This is a very lonely life, and it becomes very easy to just go astray. It becomes very easy to just, कहते हैं ना कि यानी कि डूब जाना, bikr jana, is to just like scatter. It becomes very easy to do that. So inshallah ta'ala, the bare minimum, we should commit ourselves in this Ramadan that we will make sure that the ulama and the sulaha of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'at will make sure that we're tasked with them, that we are corresponding to them, that we are making advice with them, inshallah ta'ala, that connection is there. Now there's a higher level of this i'tisam as well, and that is maybe on a metaphysical level. So what we explained in the first is more of like a physical relationship, and more, it's like relationship that you would do with like insan on a physical level. So Mashaykh have said that the more that the chosen kind of the khas, the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, their i'tisam, of course the first level is there. So when it builds on it, when you develop that connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, now this is more that devotion that a person has with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that they have really just made sure that the object of all of their mihnat, their striving, their endeavors becomes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's a complete devotion to Allah. Complete devotion to Allah. Right? So in the first, if you say it's a raghaba, now that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just becomes like a talab for a person. And this and there's a sort of like devotion that emerges within the self that kind of negates everything else that is out there. Right? And this is a level that some mashayikh will say that people will gain sort of like a huduriya qalb. They will gain this, that the true fa'il haqiqi is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like they see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not in a physical sense, but in the world, and they see His plan in the world around them. So that is the complete devotion that the khawas usually have. That now they're overwhelmed with that ihsas, with the mahsusat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's presence. So naturally what happens is it negates makhluk, because when your khaliq becomes so ghalib, so dominant in your mahsusat, then it's a negation. So this is where the fa'ili haqiqi, tajalliyat af'aliyah come in, that Allah ta'ala does it. All the izzah is from Allah, and zillah is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's the one who gives, He's the one who provides. Those of you, and you should try, inshallah, those of you who have gone out in da'wat tabligh, isn't that what they say? Allah ke siwa kisi ke saath na hone ka yaqeen hona. Allah se hi hota hai. Right? So this is what they repeat, and that's an intellectual exercise, really, that you're saying it, repeating it, that only Allah can do, only Allah. So your mind kind of follows that. But here we're talking on a very metaphysical level, that i'tisam automatically comes in. Okay? And then the mashayikh will also say that the akhs al-khawas, really the few chosen ones, and it's a journey for every one of us, are those who really have this kind of communion. This is ittisal. So their i'tisam is more like ittisal. What we call in the lingo of tazkiyah, we'll say that such a person has received, has become wasil billah. So this wasal of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, again, a very metaphysical level. Okay? This qurb and this wasal of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is realized. Usually that manifests itself in some mashayikh, as they call it, this like fana'iyat, annihilation. Again, not a physical one. It's a very metaphysical fana'iyat, that their own sense of self is also annihilated. And they are so overwhelmed with this presence, right? This remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that their own sense of smell. We have studied in books that there were mashayikh who forgot their own names. There were mashayikh that they had khuddam who would be with them for years and they just couldn't remember their names. Like, who are you? And there is some precedence in a hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the one, for example, narrated by our mother, that Aisha Siddiqa radhiyallahu ta'ala anha, that when the adhan would start, takbirat tahrima, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would go in this state, that when I would come in front of him, he would say, Mananti, who are you? And she would say that I'm Aisha. It's like, Aisha who? It's like, I'm Abu Bakr Siddiq's beti, daughter. It's like, Abu Bakr Siddiq. Right? So this is a state. Again, we were putting a label on it. Again, this is a label that Mashaykh have put in of fana'iyat, that one is so overwhelmed with that sense, or with that muhabba, with that ishq, that everything else is just completely wiped. And so it's like, who are you? What is this? Let me just get to my mahbub. Huh? So Mashaykh experienced that, sometimes it's for seconds, sometimes for minutes, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days, weeks, months. And some can get stuck into that. And again, there's some technicality behind it. They can get stuck in this maqam, and those are the people who are usually called the madzubs. Right? So they are stuck in a jazb that is difficult for them to come out. Usually it is within the daira of what is known as walayat sughra, and when that happens, they are just in that state perpetually. Now they have a maqam in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no doubt, but such people are usually not chosen for guidance. They are like really chosen for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They'll do zikr, they'll do ibadah, they will not apparently take care of their physical self and hair all over the place, and because they've kind of lost it, they're lost in this ecstasy. But they might be, they have a maqam in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if they're going through this jazb. But when it comes to hidayat of Allah, towards Allah, like, or da'wat ilallah, usually these people, these mufridat, they're not chosen, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses somebody who's not stuck in this state. Okay? So this is, again, just to kind of a little bit of a reminder that, we recommit ourselves to this rope of Quran and Sunnah, as understood by, this 1400 years of tradition, starting from Sahaba Ikram Ridwanullahi Ajmain, all the way that has been handed down to us. We commit ourselves to the apparent Sharia, and then we also ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to get us haqiqah, or the batini ulum of the Sharia as well. So this commitment to being devoted solely to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so His ahabbiyat is ghalib on us, as well as maybe a few seconds of madhubiyat might not be such a bad idea as well. So even asking for that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah, you give us, Allah Kareem, you're the one who provides. So if it has khair in us, inshallah ta'ala, give it to us as well. So may Allah ta'ala make it easy for all of us, inshallah. May Allah bless us with His true love, true correction, true ruju. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept all of us, inshallah. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.